Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Whether you are a sales professional, not in sales but interested in helping people solve problems, or a founder, CEO who is looking to grow your business, you'll find practical tools, stories, and experience you can apply to your role. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm here with Mike Simmons, the co-founder of Catalyst Sale. How are you today, Mike?
Jody, anytime I get a chance to talk to you, I am doing great.
Well, how's the summer been so far in the Phoenix area?
Hot.
Yes, I imagine we're actually getting decent weather up here. You know, low 70s, high 60s. That's probably winter for you.
That is a good month in the winter. I mean, sometimes it gets a little cold down here. I mean, in December, January, sometimes into February, we might get into the 30s at night, which is really cold for us. The other day, I was in the Jeep, and as I was driving back from the office, the thermometer gauge said that it was 120 degrees outside.
And, my goodness.
Yeah, but you know, as they say, it's dry heat. The monsoon season has been pretty crazy. We've got some trees that we need to get taken care of, and it's been really hard to get people out just for general maintenance type stuff because the valley's been hit pretty hard with monsoon. So if you're planning on coming out to Phoenix, the time of year to come out is January, February, March. You might come out, late in November, December. Those are some really good months to travel to the Valley of the Sun. If you're thinking about moving out here, those are good months to visit. If you come out during the middle of the summer, you may not want to come back. But I would take this heat over the stuff that folks would get in the Southeast any day. I mean, we don't have to worry about humidity. Even with the monsoons, you get a little bit of humidity. But I don't think anybody is listening to the podcast to hear about the weather.
No, probably not. Probably not. Not unless you're going to give a forecast. Then maybe they'd be interested. But I do want to turn us to a topic. I know a few people recently who have changed roles, whether that's in their organization where they had a position that they had been in for quite a while, but then a new opportunity came up that was drastically different, but within the same organization, and they did it. But I also know a couple of people who recently have just left. They've been doing the same job for quite a while, and to get new opportunity or a better fit for them, they left an organization and went to a new role. And I know this is something people in sales have to deal with as well. And I thought, well, I should bring that to Mike Simmons because I think that would be a good topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's everybody. I mean, like I've got a number of people in my network who've gone through this similar kind of thing where they've started new roles, whether those are sales roles inside organizations, they're moving into new markets, or moving into leadership positions, or even just lateral moves where they're changing organizations. So the market must be pretty good for those people who are looking for opportunities because there's a lot of transition that's happening out there.
Oh, and you could be onto something on why the transition is in place because people have confidence in the opportunities that are out there and that they don't have to hang on to a job that they might not like, or they feel like they've worn through it by being there for so long, and maybe there's not new opportunities. So maybe you're onto something. It's just the market is leading people to take new chances. When you do, this is what I'm interested about in this topic though, Mike, is that I want to know what advice you have for people when you take on a new role. What do you do? I don't know how long it's been since you've taken on a new role in an organization, but what do you do? How do you handle that? You're at a new position, whether it's at the same organization or a whole new company. Now you find yourself in a new role. What do you do?
Well, this is another one of those things where I think it crosses that question, that the approach crosses so many different scenarios. And for me, the process is the same. Whether we're onboarding a new client, which we're in the process of doing, or you're moving into a new role inside an organization, one thing to keep in mind is you don't know what you don't know. And there's a book that I had read a number of years ago, and it looks like there's an updated version of it. It's by Michael Watkins, The First 90 Days, updated and expanded proven strategies for getting up to speed faster and smarter. For those who've listened to the podcast for a while, we talk about 30, 60, 90-day plans, 180-day plans, 365-day plans. We talk about revisiting our goals and our objectives. But to bring things back to Jody, to your question, in that first 90 days, what I try to do is go in with limited or really reduced or minimized preconceived notions about how the organization operates, who does what inside the organization, where people fit in the organization, how the org chart is set up. I go in there and first with this idea of I need to learn as much as I can in that 90-day period before I start focusing on what I'm going to implement or what I'm going to do next or how I'm going to implement those things. So in that first 90-day period, a lot of it is about learning. A lot of it's about listening. That's where I spend most of my time.
What type of information are you trying to learn during those 90 days?
A lot. I mean, one thing is like, who are the informal leaders inside the organization? Who are the people that others go to, that others trust when they need to get work done, when they need to get information, when they need to capture insight? Who are the informal leaders inside the organization? So I want to know those. And I also want to know who the formal leaders are inside the organization. Who are those who are responsible for specific functions? So, let's say that I'm going in as a new VP of sales inside an organization. I want to understand who all the members of the team are that I would be working with, who are all my colleagues in different functional areas. The vice president of operations, the vice president of marketing, if that's a role inside the organization, the vice president of product, if that's a role inside the organization. I want to understand who that leadership team is. I want to get information from them, basically interview them to capture information from them around why they do the work that they do, how they do the work that they do, things that their teams are struggling with, how they've worked with the former VP of sales, the person who was in the role previously, what challenges they had. Where could we as a sales organization have done better? What are some of the things that we really did well? So this is about me working to build a high level of rapport with other members of the organization. And at the same time, getting to a point where I understand the organization from each of the functional area perspectives.
I was thinking of one of the times I changed a role. When I was a park ranger, that's not uncommon to change parks or change your role within a park. But when I made a drastic shift and went back into the business world, and I had not done anything like that in so long. And they said, and I loved the company, but I just showed up at a time when they were really busy. And the first week was, hey, we're too busy to show you anything. Just look around, find stuff out. Here's access to all the files. Go through anything you want to. And I had for the first week, I had to entertain myself by going through files, just reading everything I could, looking at customer lists, all that sort of thing. It was an awkward first week. That's probably not ideal, but it also was really interesting, kind of liberating to have the opportunity to learn anything you wanted, where coming from state government, where they just say, look, here's 27 yellow binders and you have to sit in this room and read all of them. Where now I had the opportunity to go and learn anything I wanted, and it was kind of fun. Now, maybe a week was too long to do that, but it was a lot of fun to be able to actually dig into anything that I wanted to dig into. And so as I hear you talking, I'm thinking, gosh, that was too long. I wouldn't recommend doing it that way, but I like the idea of having people have the opportunity to kind of learn what they want to, maybe within some structure. But I'm curious now, we've got an idea of what you try to learn, but how do you try to learn it? I had access to look at anything on the company files, and that's where I got most of it. Do you do that sort of thing? Do you have conversations? How do you know who you want to go talk to and that sort?
Well, I mean, fortunately being in sales, you get really comfortable with doing research. So before going into the organization, I would try to do as much research as I can about the organization? Who are the people that I'll be working with? Are there some common things that we're interested in based on what they're posting in social media, or based on what they're sharing in LinkedIn, or based on the companies that they've had an opportunity to work with? So I would leverage the pieces of information that are available. I would hope that in most of the organizations that people are moving into, they've got some kind of an onboarding program. So there's some kind of structure. And, most cases, the first person they're talking to is someone in HR as they go through the process inside the organization to understand how, or to have them be an official employee. They fill out tax paperwork. They fill out benefits paperwork. They fill out information so that they can get an email address. Maybe they get a laptop that's distributed to them. When they're engaging with those folks and they've got access to those people, that's a good time to ask some questions. You can ask HR who many of the folks worked with, or who were some of the folks who worked with the person that was previously in that role. And they might be able to provide you with a little bit of insight. But use any of those opportunities that you have to talk with people to build up rapport and gather information. And the way that I would do that is through asking questions. So it wasn't as much, I can't think of an instance where someone said, here's all the data, here's all the information. Go ahead and just kind of figure it out on that end. If they did that, as much as I like looking at data and as much as I like looking at information, I probably would try to find someone who's in a similar role to me, or someone who would have worked with the person who was in there previously, and ask them for some direction. What's really important is, keep in mind that these people have other roles that they're responsible for. They have their day jobs, so they're not going to be there to babysit you. But as you go through this learning process, this education process, they're trading their time with you. So make sure you're delivering value and being conscious and cognizant of their time. So don't overstay your welcome in those discussions. I wouldn't turn this into, hey, can we go out for a 3-hour lunch so you can tell me everything that I need to know about the organization before I dive in? Try to do it in context. Maybe there's a coffee for 15 or 20 minutes, or some time in another area of the organization where you can ask some of those questions. But getting back to it, if there's likely is going to be some kind of structured onboarding program, find out what that program is. If that structured onboarding program doesn't exist, find out some people who've recently been hired into the organization and have a brief conversation with them about lessons learned in their first couple of weeks on the job.
One way that it served me well to just have the opportunity to look at stuff and not really worry about anything else is I saw so much I didn't understand, and I filled up pages with questions, and I didn't chase somebody down and get those answered right away in one session. But over time, I was able to check all those off and say, oh, I learned about this either because now I've seen something else that answers that question, or I had the opportunity to sit down with somebody. And I think that is a great practice, even if there's a formal onboarding process that you're deliberately walked through. They cover all the things they know new people are going to want to know, but you are going to have individual questions yourself. And I would just keep track of those. The first 90 days, just keep jotting questions down and then seek out the answers, whether that is through company literature or you just observe something, or when you get the time to sit down with somebody, you get 15 minutes of their time, just pull out one of your questions and find out.
Yeah. And I mean, really what you're highlighting there, Jody, is the importance of having a plan. Part of the that planning process is identifying those questions. The other thing I would highlight there too is don't limit yourself to just one person. Because if you ask that question of one person in the organization, now you've got their perspective and only their perspective. You might miss some things. You might miss some context. So there'll be some common questions that you have that you may ask multiple people in the organization as you paint your picture of what's happening in the organization. Now, all of this that we've focused on so far has been about gathering information and learning and listening and consuming information. I think another thing that we've not discussed yet, but it's really important, is have the conversation with the person who brought you in, or a group of people who brought you in, and make sure you understand what their expectations are. So an important question for them is, what are your expectations here over the first 90 and 180 day period? Like, what are some of the things that we need to accomplish that you want me to accomplish in order for us to say, yep, you're on the right track, or you're making the kind of progress that's expected? Because if you don't know that information, it's hard to determine, are you on the right track personally, and have you designed your plan properly? Remember, the person who brought you in, they want you to be successful. It is expensive to train. It's expensive to retrain. It's expensive to go through a hiring process. It's expensive to take a lot of time in the onboarding process. So I would expect that you can ask that question directly of those folks and get a bit of guidance, at least in their perspective of what they'd like to see accomplished during that period.
We've focused a lot on what you should do during the transition in the first 90 days and how to help yourself out. But is there anything that we should be aware of that maybe we shouldn't do during a transition?
I would be really, really careful about implementing things. Like, what authority do you have? I mean, you might have the authority. It may say, just based on your title and your capability, you may have this ability to just implement things and try to impact change in the organization. But it'd be pretty arrogant of you to do so without the complete context of what's happening inside the organization today and what the current situation is. So I would use the first 90-day period to listen and learn, rather than looking at that period as an opportunity to start implementing things. Now, there may be some day-to-day type things. Like, let's say that I'm in a lower level role inside an organization. I need to say lower level. I'm in an individual contributor role inside an organization, and I'm primarily responsible for building out a territory as a new sales rep, or working to put together marketing copy around a specific campaign. Those are some really tactical things where you start making progress and you're going to implement components. But if you're implementing change that impacts others inside the organization, I wouldn't even consider those items, wouldn't share those items with anybody until after I've been able to go through that unconscious incompetence component and move to at least a conscious level of incompetence, or a conscious level of some sort of competence.
All right. This is my last question for you, Mike. That we've talked about how to take on a new role, a transition as you get into it. But let's just say I'm in the middle of a transition, a new role when I hear this. What is one thing you can tell me that I can do tomorrow that will help me out, make this transition easier?
Take notes. Review those notes on a consistent basis and see if you can identify patterns in either how people are engaging with you, how you're engaging with others, things that are happening inside the organization. You just take notes. And then beyond take notes is, don't assume anything. I mean, it just is, as you make any assumptions, all you're doing is creating more and more risk. And then the third one, find your advocates inside the organization. I know Dan Cockrell talked about identifying an advocate at a leadership level. Find your advocates. This is a little bit different. Find your advocates inside the organization who want to see you be successful in the role that you're in, because your success potentially impacts their success. If you can find those advocates inside the organization, they can help you uncover and reveal some of the blind spots that may not be apparent to you as you're going through that process of drinking from a fire hose and learning new things about the organization.
That is a wonderful way to end this, Mike. If anybody has questions about a transition they're currently in, they want to do better the first 90 days, I want you to reach out to Mike, because he's got just great advice. He's been through this several times. He knows what he's talking about. Mike, if someone just has a question and they want to get your advice on it, how can they get in touch?
I love seeing questions on Twitter. @Simmons_M is a great way to do it, but those are public. So if there is a question that you have or you'd want it to be private, just send a comment to me in Twitter and ask me to follow you. And then you can send that to me as a direct message. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn, or connect with me on LinkedIn. And you can reach us in general at hello@catalystsale.com. I do have one more thing I'd like to add. And this is not, this is more of a just be careful, more of a risk type thing. be careful in that first 90 days of trying to do everything. Like one of the traps that a lot of people will fall into, and I just had a conversation with someone about this the other day, where they get this project that gets dropped on their lap and immediately they want to demonstrate that they're able to do the job. So they're returning those things really quickly. If you're being, and Lee's talked about this a couple of times, both on the Creating Disney Magic podcast and when he was on here as a guest, if you're responding or reacting to all of these requests that are coming in, you're letting other people control your calendar and you're not taking time to do the important but not urgent activities. So be really mindful of your time and how many things you say yes to in those first 90 days. You might be overwhelmed with projects. So I know that carried things on a little bit longer, but yeah, if you've got questions, I'm happy to chat about this stuff. Look forward to the discussion and look forward to hearing how you've been successful in the first 90 days in a role that you've taken on recently.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. And if you've liked this message, if you know somebody who's going through a transition, they're in their beginning stages, the first 90 days, and you think this will benefit them, please go ahead and share it with them. And if you do it on social media, tag us on Catalyst Sale and we'll follow right along. Thank you so much for listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast.